Welcome, everybody. My name is John McNerney. I'm the City of Davis Wildlife Resource Specialist. So I'm a wildlife biologist for the City of Davis. And I've been managing the Davis Wetlands project for the last 20 years, largely since it was developed out there. And I wish we could all be together, obviously out at the Davis Wetlands, but through the magic, if you will, of technology, we can do a tour virtually. So we get kind of the feel of what you might experience while engaging in the Davis Wetlands out there. I do encourage everybody to go ahead, and if you have a question, feel free to type that into the chat to the moderator. So if you're new to Zoom, you can go down to the chat button, open that up, and at the bottom you can click on the two icon, and you'll see the person called moderator there. Go ahead and click on moderator and then type in your question, and the moderator will interject. If there's a question, she'll go ahead and read it, and we can all feel like we're getting our answers, questions as we're going along here, so feel free. The other thing that I wanted to describe or explain today is the relationship between the City of Davis Wetlands project and the Yolo Basin Foundation. And this has been a long partnership with the Yolo Basin Foundation and the city ever since the Davis Wetlands were installed, right around the same time when the Yolo Wildlife Area was put together. Yolo Basin Foundation has been instrumental in connecting people, educating people, and engaging them with these wetland systems, and that includes the Davis Wetlands. So for the last 20 plus years, they've been leading our docent program. So they've been leading this particular program that you guys are engaged in today. And it's been a wonderful resource to the city. You know, I like to participate as much as I can in their projects as well. You know, I will lead a tour as I'm doing today, but I also like to engage with the bat tours and other things over there at the basin because I got some wonderful programming. So I'm glad everybody is here today to help support the Yolo Basin Foundation as well. So, and I noticed we had, Sarah, go ahead and splash back up the photo of where we are today virtually. We are at the Davis Wetlands. So this, if you're not familiar with the Davis Wetlands, this is a site which is located northeast of the City of Davis proper. It's out near the Davis Wastewater Treatment Facility, or the Yolo County Landfill, if you're familiar where that's at. In this image right here, if you see the little red icon says City of Davis Wastewater Treatment Plant. If you go about a mile east of that icon, you can see there's a little U shape in the blue lines there, where the Willow bypass and the Yolo bypass meet. So kind of near, if you see along Interstate 80 where it says Webster, and then you go just right of that. Sorry, can you go back to that map again, Sarah? Yeah, thanks. Where right next to the word Webster on Interstate 80 there, there's an icon, and if you go directly north of that, you can see that U shape that I'm talking about. So yeah, now splash back or go back to the actual aerial image of the wetlands, and there's that U shape. So the Willow bypass is on the left-hand side there, and then the Yolo bypass is on the right-hand side. And you can see it's a series of cells. It's an engineered wetlands, engineered restoration wetland, and it was designed primarily to, well, actually multi-purpose. So many different reasons why the wetlands were installed. And one was wastewater treatment to help polish the water that was being treated at the wastewater treatment facility, but also to help capture stormwater from the City of Davis to help settle suspended solids and help treat that water as well. But obviously, when you put water out there and you create topography and add native vegetation and other things, you get wonderful wildlife habitat. So the other purpose was to restore and create habitat to support wildlife, but also to make it a nice place for humans to go out and recreate by watching wildlife and studying wildlife and painting wildlife, etc. So it's a wonderful spot. So the image you actually see right now isn't the Davis Wetlands, and unfortunately, one of the challenges that we have with public access at the Davis Wetland site is
Davis Wetland.
sharing.
So this picture is.
Go ahead. Oh, so the one of the challenges with sharing the land out there for these mixed purposes is that there is some hunting activity to the north of our property. And so when our Yola Basin Foundation crew went out there, they found that there was some hunting, active hunting going on just north, waterfowl hunting. They didn't feel safe being in the vicinity, so they actually backed away. But this is very close to the wetlands. These are the rice fields just north of the wetlands. So that's all flooded rice field. Equally as important, waterfowl habitat, and certainly representative of what wetland habitat could look like out at the Davis Wetlands. But I do encourage everybody who is checking in today to visit the wetlands at some point. There are public access hours. They generally coincide with the hunting season and the non-hunting season. So between September 1st and February 15th, it's Mondays only from 7 a.m. To, I believe, 1 p.m. Yep, so right there. And then after February 15th, so coming up in a couple months here, it'll be every day. So 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. And if you have any questions, you can always go to the City of Davis's website. You can go to the Yola Basin Foundation's website. You can reach out to us via email or call us, and we'll be happy to give you more specific info there. So as I mentioned, the purpose of that wetlands, the Davis Wetlands, was multi-purpose. And we've noticed over the years that its value in helping to treat wastewater has changed. Before, when the wastewater treatment facility treated water to a certain level, the wetlands and the natural systems out there were actually very useful in helping to what we call polish the water. So to help refine the quality of the water before we discharged it out into the into the environment. And but over the last several years, I want to say the last 5 years, some improvements have been made to the wastewater treatment facility to improve the quality of the water that's being treated there. So, and actually we're treating the water there at a higher level, a level that's such high quality that actually using it or putting it into the Davis Wetlands, look, we have some either geese or swans flying over there, a little tough to tell here, but large waterfowl flying in V formation.
Canada geese.
Oh, they are geese, okay. So she has the benefit of audio out there. And a lot of times when you see a large bird and large birds in formation like that, you can say, oh, maybe swans, maybe geese, maybe white-fronted ibis. But you're not going to be able, unless you have binoculars or you're out there listening. A lot of times birding includes being able to hear the bird to do a positive identification. So, always encourage people, learn how to ID them, but certainly learn how to ID them from listening as well. And here in the spotting script, you guys can see a great blue heron. And this is, looks like a male, and it probably is still has a little bit of a breeding plumage there. You can see the nice fine feathers on the front of it. And this is a what we call a wading bird. So they have very long legs. They work around the transition of open water habitat usually. They eat pretty much everything. These guys are opportunistic omnivores, so they eat fish and crustaceans and mice and rats and small birds and ducklings and you name it, whatever they can get that long bill into. Yeah, and there's a closer image of one. Looks like it has a fish or something in its mouth there. But you can see that long bill. That's a perfect spearing implement. So they will jab that down into the water They are a stalk and spear hunter, and you're equally as likely to see them in an upland situation as you are around the water, because they will go after mice and voles and other things up in the field. They're pretty neat. There's that whole group of birds includes the snow egrets and the great egrets, and they are, you know, interesting thing about these birds is they were once considered near extinction, especially great blue herons. And the reason, this was back in the 30s, well, early 1900s. And the reason is you can see those beautiful long feathers that are coming off its chest there. They were highly prized as hat feathers. So back in the day when hats were all the fashion, you know, having the feathers and the other plumage, fineries on that hat, these were high value. So they were actually harvested in high volume. In fact, such high volume that their populations began to crash, and there was a lot of concern about that. So the federal government did step in and begin to control the harvest of certain species for their feathers like this. And luckily they recovered quite well, and they're now pretty abundant out there. So that's pretty nice. So yeah, the Davis wetlands now are, the quality of the wastewater, which I was describing before, is so fine now that sending the wastewater to the to the wetlands is a bit problematic, because wind action can actually degrade the quality of water by suspending sediments. You know, the birds pooping in the water, it can actually make the water to a level where we aren't able to discharge it anymore, which is unfortunate. However, the beauty is we are allowed to reuse this water for beneficial purposes. So now, instead of treating wastewater, we're using the wetlands to store treated effluent for reuse. So just the fact that we're creating habitat with it is a reuse, but then in the future, we may be able to pump the water out of there at certain times of the year to help irrigate farmland in the vicinity. So it could maybe rice, wishful thinking someday that we might be able to irrigate rice with that water, but certainly other crops like alfalfa and sunflowers and other things. You know, that water is perfectly high quality and perfectly, it's good for irrigating that stuff. So in the future, that's likely what will happen. In the long future, maybe with some improvements to infrastructure, we may be able to get that water even back into the city of Davis to be able to use it for irrigating parks and landscaping around town, maybe even new development, get it plumbed into those existing services so that, you know, we don't have to rely on the high quality clean water out of the river and out of the mountains. We can begin to use and reclaim all the water that we're already using that goes down the drain. So yeah, that's the future of it. The wetlands were built in, or finished, I should say, in about 1998, around there, first flooded about 2000. So they've been creating habitat for the last 21 years. Right around the same time, the Yolo Basin or Yolo Wildlife Area was created. The money that came to the city of Davis was able to use to develop these came from the federal government, and it was money for, it was a federal appropriation that basically was to offset some of the loss of habitat of wetlands in particular as a result of the levee system. So all those levees that we see around town that help keep floodwater out of either prime agricultural land or our houses, you know, those really did a lot of damage to and removed a lot of habitat, a lot of wetlands habitat. In fact, 95% of California's habitats were destroyed or altered as a result of the levee system and other human developments. The upside of the levees is that, yeah, we get a lot of really high quality farmlands, and certainly that's important, but at unfortunately the loss of some very productive habitat type. So restoring habitat, wetlands habitat, has become very important to humans. And so as part of that, we are funding more and more, more restoration. And here's an example of some of the waterfowl you'll see out here at the wetlands, and certainly in the rice fields to the north. Those are swans, tundra swans. I love the fact that we're looking at them through a scope. They're very particular birds. They're very sensitive to human encroachment. So it's not very easy to get close enough to them to take a good look. So having a spotting scope can be a wonderful way to view wildlife at a distance and really capture some of their natural behavior. Clearly, these birds are aware of the human activity. Our camera people here, you know, they're looking over this way, and they're certainly not entirely comfortable. But that's important when you're a big bird like this on the ground or on the water. You have to be able to have very good vision to see if there are any predators nearby that might want to, you know, run up and capture you. And they finally got uncomfortable enough to get up and fly away there. But amazing birds. They breed up in the Arctic tundra, and they will travel down here during the wintertime, where conditions are far more favorable this time of year than up in the Arctic tundra. And they they really need the wetlands habitat to maintain body fat and to basically build up their reserves again for the return flight back up. That's a long way that they have to fly. But you saw in that earlier image, the V formation that these birds fly in. The swans, the geese and the swans will both do that. And that's very important because the V formation actually assists them to conserve energy in flight. They use some of the physical properties of air current that's being disrupted off of the bird in front of it. So if they're kind of following behind the bird slightly off to the side, that bird in front of them is breaking up the air a little bit to make it easier for its partner behind it to fly. So they don't have to use quite as much energy as they might if they were just flying right in through the air or into the wind. It creates a windbreak for them. If anybody is familiar with race car driving, another term for that is drafting, where you'll see race cars coming up real close behind each other. That car behind them is using way less fuel because of that, and they're able to not have as much drag or resistance, so they can go faster. So again, in the video here, in the spotting scope image, you can see some other birds that will utilize these wetland systems. I see some gulls, a little tough to tell which ones they are, but they're probably California gull, maybe Western gull. Varying ages. Gulls are difficult to learn, but certainly they can be rewarding to learn. As far as how to identify them. We also see some waterfowl out there. The northern shoveler, which is, there's a male with the white chest kind of swimming around out there. Oh, there's one a little closer to us. Very striking birds. They have green heads, white chests, kind of a rusty red side, and a very broad bill. Oh, great. There's a perfect image to kind of see. The bill there you can see is big and it's broad. In fact, the hunters give these birds a name as perfect. Thank you for that, Sarah. You can see that broad bill there. They call them spoonies or spoonbills, or but the common name is a northern shoveler duck. And they have very cool, and I don't think we have an image of this, and now that I think about it, it would have been great, but they have this really wonderfully modified tongue. And if you've ever seen a duck's tongue, it's generally not super impressive. It's like any other tongue you see out there. It can be smooth and straight, but these shovelers have these tongues that look like a comb, almost like you might use to run through your hair. And the very long spines running along the side, and so that fills up that big broad bill. And as they go along, they're sucking little bugs and little algae and other little tiny organisms off the top of the water, and they're sifting it just like a whale might do through its baleen, sifting it through that tongue. and then swallowing that material, and they're constantly doing that. That's how they've adapted to live. Other ducks don't have that strategy. Most of them are just gleaning stuff, picking stuff off the water. Some of them will tip, and maybe we'll see that out here where they'll go head down into the mud that's down below, so their little tail ends stick up into the air. It's kind of cute and fun to watch. It looks like we probably also have some mallards out there. And I think I see a teal swimming away, but a little difficult to tell right now. You know, one of the great things, again, about having a spotting scope is it does let you get up close. But on an overcast day like today, it is very challenging to get positive IDs on stuff. Oh, there's a pintail in this image too. To right there, kind of in the center right of the spotting scope image. See that nice long tail? That's the pintail there. Beautiful bird. Rafting ducks, so they will spend a lot of their times out in the middle of big open waters like this. And they also are migratory, like a lot of waterfowl that show up here in the winter. They will fly up into Canada and the prairie pothole region to have babies, and then they turn around and fly back down to the Central Valley. And you know, as you've probably heard already a couple times, is that we do have a lot of birds this time of year that are migratory, winter migrants. They're just here during the winter time, and then they turn around and fly back up north to do the reproduction. We are in the heart of the Pacific Flyway, which there are several migratory corridors that are around the northern and southern hemispheres. We're in what's called the Pacific Flyway. And so we see a lot of birds that nest up in the northern latitudes right above us. So that would include most of Western Canada up into Alaska, maybe even to Eastern Asian continent. And they will also, you know, we'll see some come even up from southern climates, so down Central America, South America, flying up here for the summertime. So they kind of do just the opposite. They don't fly down here in the winter, they actually fly down to Mexico during the winter, and then we'll circle back up here and reproduce during the summertime. So I'm seeing a couple of questions that
Oh, can you see the question?
Yeah, I have them posted up here. Let me take a step back here. I think, what's the power of the spotting scope? Nancy, do you have an answer to that?
I don't know what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have it. I don't have access to my spotting scope, but this is a pretty good one. It's pretty clear out there. Oh, and look, there's a widgeon, American widgeon out there. If you guys see the duck right in the center with the white forehead, looks like it bumped its head up against a wall of white paint, you know, with a freshly painted white wall there. A little hard to make out now because he's huddled up with the other ones. But that's an American widgeon. They're a very striking bird as well. And I don't know if we have an image of that, but we can certainly get that up there. Okay. So the spotting scopes, again, are useful, except when there's a lot of overcast or low light conditions. And then it can be a real challenge. Then you're learning, yep, there's the American widgeon. Yeah, isn't that a beautiful bird? They're really cool. They eat a lot of bugs and things off the bottom of the benthic invertebrates is what we call them, but they can be midge larvae or little worms that live down in the soil, and they're tippers. So they'll tip their whole body over to reach down to get into the muddy substrates there and pull up and root around and pull up the worms out of the mud. But again, low light conditions, difficult. Sunny conditions would be great. You see a lot more color, and you saw how that American widgeon was super colorful. It had greens and reds and whites. All you can really see right now when he shows up again is the white forehead, and then that's how you go, okay, I know that's pretty characteristic of that widgeon. And so I know in those conditions, that's what I'm seeing. The other thing is call. Again, I mentioned, you know, relying on your eyes is important, but you don't always have to. A lot of times sound is all you need to identify. In fact, most of the time it's all you need. If you can learn waterfowl sounds, you'll hear that the widgeon and the pintail and the teal, everybody has it, and even the mallard, everybody has a different vocalization. Mallard and shoveler can sound very similar, but even when you're listening to the nuance, you begin to understand that one's a little flatter and a little more, you know, raspy, and the other one's a little higher and a little clearer. Some ducks whistle, you know, some chirp, you know, it's all over the board, but it really can help you to, if again, in low light or distance viewing like you're doing here, we're doing here, it can help you to identify them for sure. So again, we don't know what the power of the spotting scope is. Another question is, do pintails, when rafting, record catastrophic molt here? So catastrophic molt would be entire molts. Some waterfowl go through partial or incomplete molts where they just shed primaries or you know, a few feathers at a time. Most birds do that so that they can continue to fly and continue to access resources on a daily basis. The pintails and a few other waterfowl will do what's known as a complete molt, where they actually have to sit out in the middle of open water and dump pretty much all their primary feathers at one time. So they're flightless for a short period of time. And that obviously is a hazard. When you're a bird and you can't fly, that removes some of your ability to escape predators. So the answer is yes, there are two molts that these birds will go through. There's a basic and a alternate molt. Well, actually, no, waterfowl just have, I have to take a step back on that one. I'm thinking they might have two molts, but now I'm thinking maybe there's one. I might actually look to Sabrina to see if she could answer that molt question, because I know she's worked with waterfowl more recently than I have. I'm starting to kind of forget if these guys do two molts a year or just one. Sabrina, do you know?
They can do 1 to 2 molts a year, depending on the species of waterfowl.
You're a little broken up. Yeah, so it's dependent on the species of waterfowl, I think, is what you said.
And also for the telescope, yes, it depends on the species. Can you hear me now?
No, maybe you could put it in the chat.
As well as the scope information.
Okay, so yeah, apologies for that. I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but the question is a good one, and they do, pintails are one of those species that do a full molt. I can't recall if it's done right after breeding up in the breeding grounds before they fly down. I think it is. I don't think they do it on the wintering ground. If they do have a second molt, some birds might. I don't know if they're complete on the wintering ground. Most of them would be post-breeding prior to migration, which makes sense because you want really good, strong flight feathers to endure that long flight. But I can certainly try to get you guys follow-up information on that after this, do a little more research on that. Okay, next question is hunting allowed on Mondays, September to February? So on Mondays, yes. So during the hunting season, Mondays, hunting is not allowed in the wetlands proper. You can't hunt the Davis Wetlands property, but the neighbors to the north and south and a few other areas around, our agreement with them is that they cannot hunt on Mondays from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. So to answer that question, yes, that public access hour, the ones we arrange for, there's no hunting. They're not allowed to hunt within proximity to the wetlands. So you're good and safe there. Also, the first Saturday of the month, which is today, generally we have an arrangement with them not to hunt it. However, the timing is off. We're out there a little earlier than we might be in a normal, we'll call hunting season or winter season, docent tour trip. Usually those are in the afternoon, and we have an arrangement with them not to hunt in those afternoons, but we're out there earlier and it's a good hunting time for a lot of birds. And I think I see there's a second part of that. Where is a good place to see waterfowl in the winter where hunting is not allowed? So a lot of the wildlife refuges do have non-hunting areas. Even the Yola Wildlife Area, I believe, have areas that are set aside for waterfowl that aren't huntable. So you can get out there to access that. Sometimes rice fields, not, you know, if you just drive up into the Colusa Basin out near the Sacramento Wildlife Refuge. Oh, yep, there's a image of the Yola Wildlife Area, and little tough to see in there, and certainly Sabrina or one of the other Yola Basin folks might be able to describe what's going on here, which areas are not huntable, etc. I'm not very familiar with the delineations out there, but I do know
could
that
address that. The parts that are not huntable are outlined in the dotted red line. So down to the the auto tour on the north end of the bypass wildlife area is open to the public all the time, and there is no hunting in the north area outlined by the red dotted line.
well, there you go. And I know there's other wildlife areas and preserves, the national preserves, that do have similar situations where you can get out there and access wetland habitat that's not huntable. So you are safe to access that. There is a transition period right at the end of February too, February and March, where we still have a lot of the wintering birds, but the hunting season is over. So, you know, maybe think about the end of February, early March to get out there to see all the wintering birds before they get up and fly north again. But we do have resident birds here as well. I should point out mallards, cinnamon teal, gadwall are the three primary local breeders. So they stay here year round, as do the northern shoveler. We do see red-headed ducks stick around more and more frequently. We also see Canada geese. Oh, we do sometimes see some holdouts. So it wouldn't be unusual to see like a pintail, for example, which is in the spotting scope view right now. They're preening, but you can definitely make out that big long tail sticking up there. Sometimes you do see them here in the wintertime, or I'm sorry, in the summertime. That's unusual, and generally they are birds that were wounded during the hunting season. They may have been shot at and it injured them to a point where they're not capable of a long distance flight anymore. They didn't die, they're still living and having a decent life, but it just becomes a more sedentary and resident life. And there's those pintails there. The male and the female look a bit different. The males have that reddish coloration to the head, very striking color differentiation there, and plus the white, what we call like a chin strap. Females, head's a little more uniform, the body's a little more drab and cryptic. And that's actually an important thing to point out about most waterfowls, that there is sexual dimorphism. So the colors between the male and the females are quite different. The males being very showy and flashy to attract a mate, and then the females being very cryptic and drab so that they can sit on a nest in vegetation without being detected, or at least having being camouflaged, if you will, not being seen very easily by a predator that's walking by. There are some birds out there that have kind of a reversed dimorphism, where the female is very showy, like the phalarope, for example, which is a type of shorebird. And the phalarope females will be super brilliantly plumaged and bright and showy, and so she's attracting mates. And then the males are a little more drab, and they're not as because they're the ones that will do most of the brooding and nesting. So it's a little bit of a reverse there. But same thing, they're on the ground and they need to be able to be cryptic. Let's see, some additional questions here. Michelle's asking, I see, she wasn't sure if they did it here or not. Yes, and I'm not 100% either, Michelle. Okay, I'm gonna drop down here. Oh wait, there's some additional info here. It says waterfowl molt 1 to 2 times a year in spring and summer. Okay, so I don't know if it's species specific, but it does sound like they are going through 1 to 2. That is dependent on the species. But again, we're not sure if pintails are doing their molting here or up in the post-breeding. I think most of them do in post-breeding. And then if conditions are right, I'm guessing on the wintering ground, if they can fatten up before their flight back up, then that would make sense for them to have some other molt, maybe not complete, but at least shore up their flight feathers a bit. All right, so a little more about the Davis Wetlands proper. We talked about it being used for once upon a time for treating wastewater. So you would see out there a series of cells, each one a little bit different elevation. Cells meaning ponds, so they're isolated ponds, and we would run the water through there in sequence. Now we just send water out there as much as we can, but we do modify the water levels to accommodate various birds throughout the year. So right now is an important time for migratory waterfowl, right? You know, we see them out there. We know it's important for them to come down here and fatten up in the winter. And so we want as much water out there as possible, just like these rice fields to the north. During the spring and summer, we'll begin to drop the water levels down a little bit to expose some of the edges, some of the mud flats around the sides, some of the peninsulas. This increases foraging substrate for migratory birds that are coming through the area, especially ones that are like shorebirds, the ones that forage in mud substrates like that. And then certainly by the fall months during the major post-breeding migration, we want a lot of, we kind of want to mix. We want a mix of mud flat, we want a mix of emergent vegetation and some water to accommodate as many of the waterfowl moving through there as possible. The conditions lately, we've been needing to store quite a bit of water, so we've been keeping the water levels up a little higher, which is super beneficial to waterfowl and certainly the local breeding ducks. So we've been seeing a lot of breeding out there. We've also noticed that that strategy, especially in the southern cells, has created quite a bit of growth of cattails and bulrush, and that's not a bad thing. Cattails and bulrush are what we call emergent vegetation. They create a unique strata, if you will, a unique relationship between open water, standing water, and then the ambient environment right above that standing water. So you have this structure that comes off the water now, and that's important to a lot of different birds like marsh wrens and blackbirds. So here's a perfect example right in front of us. This is all cattail and looks like some bulrush in there, but mostly cattail. So this is a channel that like a drainage ditch, if you will, which runs down along here. And so it's got standing water in there, and there's water in there right now. And that could be super important to birds like marsh wren, blackbirds. Even this time of year, we'll see a lot of seed-eating birds, white crowned sparrows and others that will come through and you know, eat the seeds that are coming off of those things. But here's a marsh wren. There's a red-winged blackbird. And we also have a this is what they call just a red-winged blackbird, possibly bicolored blackbird, but we also have an endangered species, which is called a tricolored blackbird, which lives out in the area. They certainly visit the Davis Wetlands. Those are blackbirds in the wintertime. So you see these big balls of birds flying around that kind of look like schools of fish and behavior. You know, if you've seen those videos of like sardines out in the ocean, and they have the penguins and the tuna that are swimming through it, and their only defense is really to ball up into these tight balls and to avoid them. Same thing is happening with these blackbirds to avoid predators. They have to be mostly worried about peregrine falcon and merlins that will hunt and eat them. They'll come and catch them and eat them. And certainly there's a lot of merlins and well, mostly peregrine falcon this time of year. And so blackbirds tend to team up and during the wintertime. Now during the summer, the spring and summer, blackbirds can be very territorial. They will defend little spaces, they'll spread out a little bit. with the exception of the tricolor blackbird, which is an interesting adaptation. They choose to nest colonially, so they will all clump together in big groups out there. Yellow-headed blackbirds sort of do that. They're a little more clumped together, but they still have little spaces within that territory. So, but the red-winged blackbirds, yeah, they don't like anybody coming near their nest site, and they'll let them know it. You'll see other birds fly by, and there's usually a fight and a chase at least. And the males also spend a considerable amount of time, warning everybody that they're on territory with those bright red wing patches that we saw, where they'll flare those out so that they catch the sun. This one's doing that right now, to let all the other birds in the area know this is his territory. And plus, maybe there's a female nearby. Maybe he doesn't have a female on territory yet, and he's trying to attract her, and he's like, look at these beautiful red patches that I have, come to my nest, come to my territory. So pretty interesting. And that little marsh wren that we saw before, they also are very territorial, and the male will sing this really beautiful chirpy song with all his might. They're tiny little birds, but they have very powerful voices. And most of the time you hear them before you see them, because they spend a lot of time down deep in that bulrush, into those cattails, deep towards the bottom, sometimes coming to the surface like this one and singing. But the point with the emergent vegetation and the cattails is that it offers these birds this protective cover, where they can attach their nests to it. They can eat bugs off of the leaves, and be right over the water. So, bugs are attracted to water, but more importantly, it's harder for terrestrial predators to get to them, because a lot of them don't like to travel across the water. I think on the spotting scope, we might have some blackbirds, actual live shots of some blackbirds there. Yeah. Yep. Those are blackbirds. A little difficult to tell if I think they are red-winged blackbirds. So they're mixed there. I think I saw a juvenile. But again, oh, there's a male with the red. You can just barely make out the red. Maybe that's a good one. But again, spotting scopes are wonderful to get you close, but in foggy days like this, it can be a little challenging to make out. I was mentioning before, being able to see the colors and hear their songs is helpful for identification, but sometimes all you have is silhouettes like this. So here you can clearly say, oh, well, this is a perching bird, right? You can say, oh, that's what that is. And sometimes that wing, so the wing is kind of dropped a little bit there from the tail. That's unique. It's not every bird that does that. A lot of times the birds will tuck their wing tips up close against their body when they're sitting out there. But blackbirds and a few other species in that genus, that's pretty typical to have the little wing drop like that when they're on perch. So there's all these other little things in just the shape of the bird and the size of its legs and bill that can help you to tease out what that animal is. It takes a lot of practice, but everybody can become an expert birder with that practice. But you have to get out there and do it, get a good field guide. The Cornell Bird Lab has some wonderful resources if you ever have the chance to go visit. I know the Yolo Basin Foundation also has some useful identification cards. Not sure how accessible those are these days, but sometime in the near future, they will be more accessible, and they're the blackbirds. I just noticed on here that pintails specifically molt in late summer. This was in the chat, and thank you for whoever that was. It may have been Sabrina who looked that up. So there you go. And it does sound like once they breed and before they migrate, they do a complete molt like that. And that, not all birds can do that. As I mentioned, if you imagine a blackbird doing that, a terrestrial bird, more terrestrial bird, it would be a real challenge because of the opening them up to predators. If you're flightless, and that's one of the main ways you get away to avoid predators, certainly losing your ability to fly is a challenge. But waterfowl because they can be out on open water habitat like this. That's why it's also very important for them to have large scale wetlands like you see out in these rice paddies here, or up, more importantly for say pintail, up in the breeding areas. They can find all the food they need and be protected from predators. So they don't need to fly, honestly, for that short period of time. They just need to be able to get up and fly down south for the wintertime, obviously. Yeah, another question here is, are the same birds here in the Consumnes Preserve by Elk Grove? The question is, yes, absolutely. You'll see all these birds, maybe even more down in the Consumnes Preserve. They have a little more of a natural riparian system. So there's different structure in that preserve. There's more trees and shrubs than you might find out in a rice field like this, or at the Davis Wetlands even, because it's an old riparian system. It's one of the last undammed systems in California, and so it still floods annually. You see floodwaters come out of the river channel and flood these upland areas, so you get a whole new structure and diversity of vegetation. And here in the spotting scope, we see a hawk of some type. I'm gonna venture a guess that it looks to me like an immature, or not an immature, but at least a hatchier red-tailed hawk. By the coloring on its chest there, it's very speckled still. And we do see a lot of these guys out there at the Davis Wetlands, especially young hawks. A lot of times they spend time, so there's the red-tailed hawks on the right, and this, for comparison with Swainson's hawks. This time of year, we won't see Swainson's hawks, which are on the left, because they are down in, well, our birds are down, the ones that breed here are down in Central America. They go down to Panama and Costa Rica to spend the winter time, and then they'll fly back up here to reproduce. Now, the red-tailed hawk on the right there is a year-round resident. The hatchier birds do spend a lot of time out at the wetlands because sometimes it's easier for them to find food. They're not the best hunters when they're their first year of life. In fact, if it's a particularly difficult winter, very cold and wet, a lot of young red-tailed hawks are actually lost to starvation, unfortunately, just because they're not very effective hunters yet. But if they live through that first year, they develop those skill sets, then they're more than likely going to make it to be reproductive adults. And those two there on the right are reproductive adults. You don't see the same dimorphism as you do in waterfowl when you're looking at hawks like this. There's no real need. They have long-term kind of relationships, and they don't really need to flash to attract each other. You can see this is probably a male and a female, I'm guessing. It could be, no, these are both adults, so I'm guessing male and female. There is a slight dimorphism in raptors, so the female is actually slightly larger, but very difficult to tell that when you're looking at them even side by side. Now here's an example of a raptor that does have pretty clear dimorphism. So this is a northern harrier. Pardon me, this is a female northern harrier. The female northern harriers are brown and or speckled like this one, streaked on the breast. Both the male and the female have a white rump patch there, and you can see that pretty clearly. So just that white patch right on the base of its tail feathers, or the tail feathers connect to the body. And I'm not sure if we have a male photo or not, but the males look similar with the white rump patch, but they are almost gray white, and uniformly gray white across. So there's remarkably different. So yeah, concurred that those were both male and female in the photo of the red-tailed hawks, and see a lot of the same birds in Consumnes. So yeah, I was, you know, you get distracted by the things that are popping up out in the spotting scope and everything, go off topic, but it always seem to circle back around. So yeah, Consumnes river birds, you're going to see most of these waterfowl where there's open water flooded habitat. But you're going to see a whole lot more other, you know, non-waterfowl type birds, mostly the warblers and the sparrows, working the riparian areas, the shrubs and the trees and those sorts of things. Near there too, you get closer to where you'll see more crane activity. So they'll, but maybe even the Consumnes River Preserve, some of the upland grassland areas, you'll see some of the cranes eating in those fields there. But yeah, most of the birds there are very similar to what you'll find here at the Davis Wetlands or the Yola Wildlife Area close by. Okay, yeah, thank you. Dr. Hawkins confirmed, I think that's Dr. Hawkins, confirmed that it's a hatch ear red-tailed hawk in the spotting scope there. So very cool. All right, so again, back to the Davis Wetlands a little bit as far as how they were designed. They're about 400 acres. They're a mix. It's a mosaic of habitats, which is kind of unique in restoration because we had the ability to have a year-round source of a constant source of water. Most other restored wetlands have the challenge where water isn't always available. It's either being used for agriculture or it's just too expensive to move around. The Davis Wetlands are unique in the sense that we, as long as the toilets are flushing in the city of Davis or people are taking showers, we'll have water available to support that system. So we are able to keep impounded water all summer long, which is important for reproductive waterfowl and other wildlife. But certainly also unique to some of the other areas. Even, for example, the Yola Wildlife Area, they don't have quite as much available water. They're a larger area, and certainly they have the Puda Creek water flowing in down there, and there's a lot of agricultural tailwater and other things. But as far as keeping the ponds wet out there, it's a little more difficult for them. So that is unique for this system. And as I mentioned before, we're able to create mud flats and control the water levels to support a mosaic of different habitat types, including riparian. So, for example, this tree here and this hawk is sitting on. We do have trees and shrubs out. One of the challenges we had when we planted that project is we used all native plants. We didn't really know what was going to survive out there. We tested the soil. We found out that it was pretty alkaline. We sit in a big alkali sink here. And so the soil is very basic, almost 9 in pH, and very high clay content of the soil. So clay has a very high shrink swell ratio. So the shrink swell ratio is like when it's wet, the clay, if you were to look at clay under a microscope, the particles almost look like dinner plates, and they're all kind of put together like this. And when water gets into them, it gets in between the plates and kind of pushes them apart into each other. So it swells and it gets really, that's why clay makes really great pottery and that sort of stuff, is because it holds that moisture and it seals up very well, but makes it very difficult for things to permeate through, including roots and other things. And then in the summertime, the other thing happens, the water disappears, they shrink and contract back together again, which creates these big cracks happening in the soil. So you get very deep cracks, some as far as a meter or more down into the soil. And that then opens up a lot of air to soil contact and evaporation, encourages evaporation, which can further rob the soil, at least the upper organic layer, of moisture. That makes it very difficult. All of that, the high pH, the clay content, makes it very difficult for plants to have a go out there, especially the upland plants, the shrubs and the trees. So out the wetlands, we see trees and shrubs that are almost in a pygmy state. They're very short, they haven't matured. We have 20-year-old oak trees that aren't nearly as tall as me, whereas you might go see the same oak tree at 20 years in more fertile soil near Puda Creek, which will be 20, 30 feet tall. So that's the difference there. But it's out there, there's structure. The willows are certainly taking over near the water's edge, so they're doing very well. Anyway, it's a unique system. We definitely encourage people to get out there. I'm being told that we have to go. And I just want to let everybody know I'm grateful for you being here today, and encourage you to go out and visit these areas as much as possible. Certainly it'll be easier to do so when we can all be together. So anyway, take care, everybody.